He called himself Mad Mike Hughes, but his real motivation wasn't madness, it was a relentless pursuit of fame. Mike Hughes dreamed of going down in history as the greatest daredevil who ever lived. Rocketry became his ticket. Each self-made steam-powered rocket launched him closer and closer to space, closer and closer to notoriety. But on February 22, 2020, Hughes' obsession with fame came at a fatal cost. Mike Hughes was no stranger to the daredevil community. Born on February 9, 1956, in Oklahoma City, he became inspired by speed and danger from an early age, acquiring a taste for it through motorcycle racing. But it was limousines, not motorcycles, that catapulted him to his first taste of fame. In 2002, the mullet-wearing Hughes set a Guinness World Record by jumping a Lincoln Town Car stretch limousine, an astounding 103 feet. The limo stunt gained him national attention, though it was just an appetizer for the main course to come. Hughes had even bigger dreams, running for governor of California, and eventually going down in history as the greatest daredevil of all time. It wasn't until Hughes' path collided with conspiracy theories that his most ambitious dream began to take shape, building and launching himself in a homemade, steam-powered rocket. In 2014, Hughes completed his first rocket in the Arizona desert. He claimed to fly at 1,374 feet high, though there was no video evidence, and doubts swirled about whether he actually rode inside. Hughes' big rocket breakthrough came when he latched onto the flat Earth conspiracy theory, in 2016. While not a true believer himself, Hughes realized the flat Earth community could be the perfect source of funding and publicity for his rockets. Presenting himself as a crusader who would fly high enough to take a picture and prove the Earth's disk shape, flat Earthers showered him with support. With their backing, Hughes quickly raised enough money to build a new rocket. But securing permission to launch proved challenging, as Hughes resisted getting required permits from the Bureau of Land Management. After delays, botched launches, relocations, and defiant posturing towards authorities, Hughes finally achieved a successful flight in the Mojave Desert, in March of 2018. The rocket reached an altitude of around 1,875 feet, almost the height of the Freedom Tower in New York City, before Hughes parachuted safely back to Earth. Though he survived the launch, Hughes did suffer some injuries, including pain in his back from intense G-forces. He was checked out by medics after landing, and later realized that he'd broken his L2 vertebrae. In the end, Hughes proved he wasn't chickening out on his mission, despite criticism from many who called his flat Earth beliefs misguided. The launch itself became a media spectacle, streamed with two commentators drinking beer and taking whiskey shots. Video of the event circulated widely online afterwards. Buoyed by this achievement, the dream of a Raccoon launch began to crystallize. A Raccoon, from the words rocket and balloon, is a solid fuel-sounding rocket that, rather than being immediately lit while on the ground, is first carried into the upper atmosphere by a gas-filled balloon, then separated from the balloon and ignited. Hughes and his partner Waldo Stakes planned to combine a high-altitude balloon and rocket to reach the edge of space. If successful, Hughes believed he would become the greatest daredevil of all time. But first, he needed more publicity and funding. Hughes' specific goal was to reach the Kármán line, where Earth's atmosphere and outer space meet, 62 miles above the ground. From there, Hughes claimed he'd be able to tell whether the Earth is a flat disk, as he suspected, or a sphere. The steam-driven rocket included 3 heaters that would produce enough steam to thrust the stuntman at least 5,000 feet into the air. He hoped to reach top speeds of up to 425 miles per hour. This goal led to the fateful day of February 22, 2020, when Hughes launched what would be his final flight. With a production crew filming for a Science Channel series called Homemade Astronauts, Hughes took off from the Barstow, California desert in a new rocket. This was just meant to be another small but dramatic step towards the Raccoon dream. Tragically, it ended up being Hughes' last step. Shortly after reaching its peak altitude, the rocket began to malfunction. The parachute that was supposed to slow its descent and allow Hughes to safely parachute to the ground deployed prematurely, and the rocket crashed back to Earth. The crash was witnessed by a handful of people, including freelance journalist Justin Chapman, who was writing a book about Hughes. Chapman described the crash as horrific, "I saw the rocket take off," Chapman said. "It looked like it was going fine, but then I saw the parachute deploy prematurely. The rocket started to spin out of control and then it crashed into the ground. When the rocket was nosediving and he didn't release the 3 other parachutes he had in the rocket, lots of people screamed out and started wailing," Chapman told BuzzFeed News. "Everyone was stunned when he crashed, and didn't know what to do." The rocket crashed within seconds, nosediving straight into the desert floor at 500 miles per hour. Hughes was killed instantly, at age 64. The likely cause was deployment of the parachute too early after the rocket scraped against the launch ladder, though Hughes had dangerously refused advice to add automatic parachute triggers as a safety measure. According to crash scene analysis and autopsy results, experts believe Hughes experienced catastrophic blunt force trauma throughout his body upon impact with the ground. The lack of shock-absorbing precautions, and Hughes' high velocity at crash, made his injuries especially severe. Major organ damage, along with unsurvivable internal bleeding, was identified as one probable cause of death. The abdominal hemorrhaging resulting from ruptured organs like Hughes' liver and spleen would have led to hypovolemic shock. Additionally, spinal fractures and likely spinal cord transection were noted, and would have been fatal, due to loss of function and nervous system damage. The violent whiplash effect on the vertebrae and neck during the crash was severe. Another finding was traumatic head injuries, and probable brain hemorrhaging. The sudden stop of the crash caused Hughes' brain to impact the inside of his skull, evidenced by fractures and swelling. This kind of closed head injury often impairs brain function and proves fatal. In summary, experts agree the multi-system organ failure, nervous system trauma, and general tissue damage sustained in the extremely high-velocity impact, led to Hughes' tragic end. The homemade rocket and lack of adequate safety precautions contributed greatly to the severity of his injuries. Defeated by the shocking accident, a group of spectators gathered at the launch site the next day, February 23, 2020. These were fans who had come to see the launch. Each was in tears as they looked at the spot in the desert where the tragedy had taken place. Despite the harsh desert conditions, some decided to make the trek on foot to view the wreckage, before it was taken away for examination. On February 25, a solemn procession took place at Shiloh Cemetery in Apple Valley, California. The daredevil, who was deeply cherished in some circles, was honored by a small crowd of mourners gathered around his gravesite. His partner Waldo Stakes and a few fans came to say goodbye. Though Hughes had lived on the fringe, his bold spirit had inspired many. Hughes' death was a tragedy, but it also served as a reminder of the dangers of amateur rocketry. Hughes was a skilled engineer and builder, but he was not a trained astronaut. He had no way of knowing how his rocket would react in the upper atmosphere, and he was not prepared for the possibility of a malfunction. In death, Hughes joined the pantheon of daredevils he long aspired to, though not in the way he imagined. Rather than becoming the undisputed greatest stuntman of all time, Hughes became a cautionary tale about the thin line between daring and reckless. His radical conspiracy theories and desire for fame clouded rational judgment, leading him to take unreasonable risks in homemade contraptions. But for all his flaws, Hughes' friends won his bold spirit remembered. The ability to dream big and chase adventure endures through those he inspired. By daring to try the impossible, Hughes showed that incredible feats can be achieved with enough passion and grit. He lived life full throttle until the very end. In 2021, the town of Apple Valley decided October 3, Hughes' birthday, would be Mad Mike Hughes Day, to honor his daredevil legacy. A memorial statue was erected at the rocket launch site, the first monument in the town dedicated to a stuntman. This meaningful memorial stands near the very location where Hughes performed his final launch, demonstrating the impact of his eccentric life. Though the circumstances of his passing were tragic, Mike Hughes' daring spirit continues to inspire those who want to push boundaries and attempt the impossible. That was the story of Mad Mike Hughes, a true daredevil who lived life full throttle until the very end. His bold exploits will not be forgotten.